Welcome to the Cross Border Interviews. This is the show where we dive into the insights of municipal political leaders from across Canada. Now, our mission on the show is quite simple. Shine a light on the dedicated individuals who day in and day out work around that council table to shape the communities that we and they call home. And for today's episode, we are honored to be sitting down and chatting with St. John's Councillor for Ward 3, Greg Noseworthy. St. John's is the perfect combination of big city luxury and traditionally small town charm. It is one of the oldest and most easterly cities in North America and has become a rare destination full of character and charisma with a contemporary, sophisticated edge. Wander down the narrow, criss-crossing streets naturally carved by horse and carriage, past the colourful jellybean row houses wedged together, lining the sides of steep hills and hidden alleyways. Once you're meandering down the harbour, look towards the Narrows and imagine a time when the waters were brimming with fishing schooners. Greg, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about yourself and talking about your community, the beautiful community of the city of St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. But before we talk about the city and talk about your acclamation, I guess I should say congratulations on being acclaimed as Ward 3 councillor for another term. How's it feel?
It feels great. Obviously, it's a different way to get yourself on council. No, I had a by-election there about less than a year ago, but it feels good. I'm really excited for another term and rolling up my sleeves and getting dirty again.
So before we get into the issues and the challenges that City of St. John's faces, let's get to know the man behind the persona a little bit. And I've got to ask a very simple question, and it's one that
Yeah.
I've asked every single person who's ever come on the show. Where's your sense of duty to serve your community come from, Greg?
It's a great question. First time I've been asked that one, actually. So, I don't come from, so I'm a lawyer by trade. Don't come from a family of lawyers or anything like that. Mom was a teacher. Dad worked at a hospital here in St. John's. Come from working class family. Both my parents volunteered quite a bit for many years. I think for me, it was just that instilling of community involvement, working with people, make sure you're building up people as best you can. And really, I think that's where it's kind of come from for me.
Was mom and dad political? Because if mom and dad were teachers in the hospital, I can imagine politics might have been discussed at the dinner table, depending on what the issue was provincially.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So, dad was a shopkeep for a local here for many years, was involved in a number of strikes provincially. Mom as well, teacher, there was a number of strikes during her career. So, a lot of union debates and things like that in my house growing up. Of course, news was always on. You were always watching what's happening, making sure that you were in the know. And, I guess for me, that's kind of where the politics come from, but otherwise, not really, no.
So what was it about the political allure then for yourself? Because I can't imagine just waking up one day and saying, I'm going to run for council in my community.
Yeah. For me,
Unless you
again,
did, and then that's a whole other conversation there.
no, 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 absolutely not. I think again, just coming from that background of, I was very fortunate, of course, to have a good education and good parents that allowed me to have that opportunity to grow as a person and become a lawyer and wanting to take that skill set and just offer it to the community. So I started my career in the nonprofit sphere, and I still do quite a bit of nonprofit work, and just really wanted to use that and apply that just to help people because so many people don't have access to those types of skill sets. And for me, it just I don't know. I guess for me, it felt like a bit of a duty to the community and the people around me just to, again, continue to build people up.
Was it always municipal when you wanted to build back a community? Because your background, your experience, you would have been prime for the selection of any political party, but you chose at the end of the day, back when you originally first ran, was
Yeah.
municipal. What was it about the municipal draw that brought you there?
I think municipal politics is the one world where we can have the most impact on the day-to-day lives of people. So somebody calls me on my phone, I pick up. They email, I'm the one responding. I go to their house. We meet up at the coffee shop to discuss issues. So for me, it's just being able to have that real one-on-one with people, just to engage in issues and really work with the people I represent.
Is it hard in 2025 to engage with people? Because I'm getting a sense, and this could be just me talking to people too much in the last 5 years of doing this show, but I'm
Yeah.
getting a sense there's an apathetic nature when it comes to municipal politics across Canada right now. In your time in office, do you get a sense that people want to talk about, and I'm going to preface this by saying
Yeah.
municipal issues, because while you are the closest to the people, you probably deal with a lot of questions that are provincial and federal jurisdictional issues. Do you get a sense that people are engaging on the issues that are important, and I shouldn't say important, but are in the municipal jurisdictional purview?
I would say thankfully, yes. But for me, I think it's because I've taken it upon myself to say, look, I'm the representative for people at the municipal level. So I want people to engage with me. I want them to know what's happening in their community, whether it's the budget. I want them to know what the budget is, what we're doing with their taxes. I want them to see me when we're doing things in, community spaces. I want people to come out and be part of this. We had an open house actually just this past week, and had a great chat with a gentleman. I didn't know him other than a couple of emails he'd sent me, and we're chatting for a few minutes about kind of the neighborhood plan we were developing. Next thing you know, I find out he knows this fella I played soccer with, and he knew of my brother who played growing up, and well, still plays. And, so you really get that community involvement. So for me, I would say, and maybe I'm a bit fortunate compared to some other, councillors across the country, but I've really tried to drive home that engagement and just get people excited about it, get people engaged on issues. And I feel like it's resonating, and I want to see more of that because it is so important. Again, we're all living in the same community, and why not?
But there's also the sense that there's often the opinion that as long as my water's turned on, my garbage is picked up, I really don't care what's going on. And that's why we've elected you. So how do you bring people to the table, and the proverbial table, if you will,
Yeah.
to ensure that they're being heard, but you're also engaging with people who traditionally don't often
Yeah.
want to be engaged because they say that's why we've elected you?
Yeah, I think that, we're really fortunate in a lot of ways of the technology we have at our fingertips. So making sure I'm available on those social media platforms or in the community groups on Facebook or what have you, just really putting that out there. But I still really do like the old school politics. So I still make a point to go knock on doors and talk to people. If somebody calls me up, they want to go meet, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for a walk around, whatever park it is and discuss this. And then you bump into somebody and you say, oh, what are you doing? And you have that conversation. It kind of just keeps growing. So I think for me, it's that blend of traditional methods that have always been there and always worked, but then building on what we have now with the social media to have that greater reach. So, it's those types of things, whether it's being involved in a local church, or if it's a sports team, those types of things. Elementary schools I go to quite often to talk to kids and, really try to engage them on different things, high schools as well. It's just about getting out there, being present, and making sure that people know that I'm here and we can build up our community and work together to do it.
We often find ourselves siloing ourselves on social media, though, and that's why I like the fact that you do that traditional engagement where you actually go out and talk to people.
Yeah.
How important is it for you to talk to people who may disagree with you vehemently about the issues that you vote on? Because the one thing that's challenging
Yeah.
for a lot of, and I say this because you're relatively new to municipal politics, just being elected in, I believe, last year through a by-election, or 2 years ago through by-election?
2024, yeah, by election, yeah.
2024
So
through
so less than a
by-election.
year, yeah.
So less than a year. The one thing that most people forget is you have to speak to everyone, because at the end of the day, not everyone votes for you. And
Correct.
I'm going to burst a little bubble for those who are about to get elected in a few days or a few weeks from when we're talking in Newfoundland and Labrador. Not everyone's going to agree with anything that you say. There's always going
Yeah.
to be some people who just vehemently disagree. So for
Yeah.
yourself as a counselor and for as a representative, how important is it for you to listen to everyone, even the people who may want to say, Greg, you got it wrong?
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. I love it. I had a great chat with one of our fellow counselors, and we were just disagreeing wholeheartedly on an issue. And I finally said, yeah, I disagree. And that's okay. We don't have to have the same opinion. And in fact, I want to have those conversations because at the end of the day, for me, it's about getting to the best answer we can. And if you disagree, I want to know why. I want to know how we can build up things. I'll give you a great example is traffic calming. A lot of people want to see things like, speed bumps and speed cameras and different things in their neighborhood. But there's also a segment of the population that doesn't want that in their neighborhood. So it's kind of working with the two sides, figuring out the best case scenario here that kind of works for everybody. Maybe it's one speed bump. Maybe it's, working with the local constabulary to have a little extra patrols, different things like that. So for me, I want those disagreements. I want people to bring it to the table so we can engage on it and solve the issues together.
Have you ever been swayed by someone's opinion that you've heard?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So
And I really do take in what people say. And I mean that when I say it, because look, I don't know everything. I never will. I don't pretend to. I always tell people again, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a doctor. I don't know these things. I rely on people who live the experience. Just today, I was chatting with a fellow who lives on a street here in St. John's. And I said, you're the type of person I want to talk to regularly because you live on that street. I don't. And I get to hear from you about what you're living with.
So it brings up a question that I often ask councillors across Canada is we all have our own moral beliefs that we hold true, that we believe is what is right and what is good and what is best for the community. But as an elected official, you are there to represent everyone. And that means, and I'm going to quote my favorite movie, Wrath of Khan, Star Trek #2, Wrath of Khan here for a second, but the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. But you, as a councillor, have to look at the issues through the residents' lens. Is it hard to do that in a community where you're so interconnected? Because I can imagine there are days when you hear a large amount of people say, we want this, but you believe that the community needs that. How do you balance those two opposing forces in your time in office so far?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it, again, it gets back to that engagement and driving that engagement to see what works best for everybody. I'm fortunate.
But
Really,
is there also, and I apologize, is it
yep.
also being truthful with people? Because that's the part where people often
Yeah.
forget
Oh,
is
yeah. Yeah.
you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to look into that," but really, you can't do anything about it. So how important
Yeah.
is it to engage, but also be truthful in the fact that
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to have to upset somebody?
I had a great conversation with a lady just this morning, and we
How
were
often
talking
do you
about,
talk to people? Because it seems like you have a lot of stories about you talk to people.
yeah, there's days where I need to make sure I'm coating my throat with honey. But we had this great chat, and I said to her, I don't want to lie to you. I can't get to where you need me to get. I just can't. And it was an issue on taxation and specifically dealing with condos. And condos, as I'm sure you know, have a unique place in municipalities. And it can be tricky because and a lot of people feel like they're being double taxed, right, between their condo fees and their municipal fees. And I was just it was a great conversation. We were going back and forth quite a bit. We agreed on a number of things. We disagreed on a number of things. And just to have that, right? Again, to not sugarcoat things, be open and upfront about it. I think people appreciate that more. At the end of the day, for me, I've really realized that at least if you're trying and you're having those conversations, people appreciate that more than necessarily getting things done. Although that's definitely a very big and important part of the job, just letting people know that I want to hear from you and I want to work on these things. I'm not always going to have the answer. I'm not always going to be able to do what somebody wants, but just to make sure that we're doing as best we can. You can't please everybody, and that's okay.
My final question about yourself before we turn to the city of St. John's as a whole. Have you found the balance of being just Greg and Councillor Noseworthy challenging so far? Because now that you're elected and you're coming
Yeah.
back for another 4 year for a full 4 years, I can imagine there's days where you just want to run to the grocery store and just grab some milk and come home. But you know that there's going to be days that you're going to be stopped at the local coffee shop, at the local restaurant. Have you been able to balance that work life? Because you're a lawyer also outside of it. So I can imagine people stop you when you're going into the courthouse or going to do your job and say, "Can we talk about my property taxes right now?"
Yeah, it happens all the time. But that, again, that's what I signed up for. So, just recognizing that for me, I'm just a kid from Cowan Heights in the west end of St. John's. I live in Mundy Pond. You'll see me walking around Mundy Pond if you want to stop and have a chat. I know when I go out that's what I signed up for. I have a few hard rules that I believe in. My partner Emily and I, we always have supper together. Every single evening, we have our meal together. We have some time together. Every single Wednesday morning, 7:30, I'm up at mom and dad's having breakfast with them, making sure I have that. And I still have, my own personal hobbies, whether it's, playing a few games with the guys late at night on the Nintendo, or if it's going to the gym for a quick workout. Just having those to keep that balance. Because if you don't have that, I don't think you'll have a long career at it. But it's been great so far. I gotta say.
Okay, you perked my interest. What was the last game you played on Nintendo? Was it the Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Switch 2 or was it Nintendo
Still the
64?
OG, still playing Switch. Actually, so it's funny you say that. So I just picked up an emulator Game Boy, and I'm playing a couple of the old school games. But I'm also playing Tears of the Kingdom Zelda on my Switch, which I haven't beaten yet. I'm a big Mario Kart fan, as many of my friends know. I'm very much competitive with that. It's where I get to really just kind of relax in the evening, have a couple games of Mario Kart online.
So I'm coming to MNL convention this year in November, and I'm going to bring my Switch now with Mario Kart. So we
Yep,
need to play that. We need to set up this room. I'm going to ask Amy Cody and the team, Rob Nolan at
please.
MNL to be able to set that up because I think it'd be awesome just to get a group of municipal councilors on Podcaster to do a random game night
I
at
love it. Let's
MNL.
do it. I won't go easy on you though. Is the only thing I'll promise.
Oh, challenge accepted. If you go easy on the media, then you're buying the media, don't you know?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, let's do it. I'm going to be going too, so I'm really excited for that. We'll have to do it.
I want to turn to the city of St. John's as a whole, but before I
Yeah,
ask some questions, I do have a little preamble that I often say on the show.
sure.
This is a conversation between the counselor and myself. This is not a motion of council, not a direction of council, not a policy of council. This is his opinion and his opinion alone. Now, it may line up with what's being talked about at council, but at the end of the day, he needs a majority of council members around the table to vote in favor or against any motion, policy, or bylaw to direct administration to administer the governance that they have just passed or rejected. With that being said, counselor, in your opinion, at the middle of September, well, just almost at the end of September 2025, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the city of St. John's heading into the next 4 years?
That's a tough one.
Okay, can
I
I
think
add?
every
I'm gonna
yeah,
add it. I'm gonna preface it,
yeah,
or challenges because I don't want you to just
yeah,
pigeonhole you on one. What are
yeah,
the top three challenges you see are going to be faced the city this next 4 years?
yeah. There's a number of issues. I think it's something like 65% of all infrastructure across Canada is owned by municipalities. It's very expensive, especially when municipalities collect something like 15% of the taxes in the country. It gets quite expensive quite quickly. And we have a number of big projects. We have roughly a $350 million a year budget, which sounds like a lot of money, but when you lose 10% of it right away to snow clearing operations every year, you quickly realize how that money gets chewed up very quickly. And that's such a vital service in the winter to make sure people can get to work, get to the hospitals, the fire trucks can get on the roads when needed. So that's a huge thing. Fiscal responsibility, but making sure that you're sustaining programs that continue to allow for responsible and reasonable growth. And ultimately the downloading of responsibilities on municipalities, I think is a massive issue and one that a lot of people don't necessarily see enough. When we talk about social issues, oftentimes councillors, mayors, deputy mayors are the ones that will get the question, but oftentimes we don't have the resources, the legislative legal resources or the financial resources or the capacity and expertise to deal with these complex issues. But that's where a lot of constituents and residents will turn is to your counselor. Because back to what you said a minute ago, they'll see me when I'm on the way to the grocery store and have a conversation about something. And that's tough. And it's really difficult. And we want to have an impact there because again, it's our community. We want people to be able to build up and we want people to have jobs and to live successful lives. But it's not always possible at a municipal level to address these issues. But the expectation is still there.
So I want to play in some of those sandboxes for a second, if you don't mind. I want to start with
Yeah.
infrastructure, which is true. I think you're
Yeah.
right when you said 65% of all infrastructure, and I think some provinces might be a little bit higher, but I think 65 is the average across Canada, is owned by municipalities. And that means municipalities are forking money hand over fist right now because we're at the age municipality wise, where a lot of the infrastructure projects that were put in the 60s and 70s are now coming of age and are being needing to be replaced. That's where a great asset management program comes into place to ensure that you are looking after the most critical issue infrastructure challenges first before you look at the things that the wants.
Yeah.
How do you see the city of St. John's balancing the challenges that around infrastructure right now? Are you in a good place, or could you be doing better? And I know we're in the midst of an election and you're the acclaimed candidate, so councillor, so it's a little bit easy for you to answer this question, and people may pick up on
Yeah.
this and go, "Oh, we should be asking questions of our council," which I think you should be if they're candidates running. Are Is St. John's in a good place to address the critical issues around infrastructure right now?
I think so, but I also think there's work to be done. And we've been very fortunate. I'll give you a great example in a second here. We've been very fortunate to have some really great staff that have had forward thinking advice and to give that to council over, the last couple of decades to really set us up well. I had another conversation today. And this was about water management. We had a very hard summer here in terms of water. We don't deal with wildfires regularly like other provinces do on the mainland. You get the flare ups in Labradors more common, but they're not as impactful on municipalities as they would be, say, in Alberta or Saskatchewan or elsewhere. So we had some very low water levels impacting a lot of municipalities. And some municipalities got to the point where they had to shut off water and close businesses and put those closure orders out. We fortunately have invested heavily in our water infrastructure for many, many years. We've had a water conservation order that's been in place since 2002. And that really has seen us through so well. You don't see people washing their cars and watering their lawns as much as maybe you might expect in kind of the movies and TV shows, that type of thing. But our water levels never got to a critical level ever. Even though we had a fire that was literally burning inside the boundaries of the city of St. John's, our water levels they were still fine. The quality of water was still fine. So it's those types of forward thinking things for our infrastructure that's really helped us well, and continuing to build upon that. Even things like, again, on the water side, we require trees to be put on new building lots. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about a tree, that tree in its area, it adds so much more moisture to the soil. That keeps the cost of water needs on the property down that much more. So it's those types of forward-thinking policies, right, that really just help deal with whether it's our climate crisis or if it's dealing with our water management. And we're very fortunate to have some great staff that do that. There's always challenges with anything, and certain policies don't always necessarily align with other interests, whether it's things with a particular industry or what have you. But it set us up fairly well, which is great.
You mentioned the elephant in the room, and I wasn't going to mention it unless you did, but I'm going to ask the follow-up question to that. Now, we did
Yeah,
see St. John's and the surrounding area under wildfire-ish challenges this summer.
yeah,
From a council perspective, how did your community fare? Because I know it was right at the time,
yeah,
and many people may not know this, but it was right at the time when the Canadian Summer Games was going on. So you had
yeah.
literally the attention of the entire country on your doorstep. And then this wildfire decides, okay, we don't care about the Summer Games. We're going to do what we want to do. How did your community fare, do you believe?
I think we did very well. There's always going to be lessons learned, which is the key thing, and I really want to drive that forward, of course, with further planning, like we always should. And I have family members that were impacted. You walked out every single day, and you thought you were in a campfire. It was that smoky at times. So I think we did very well. There's warning signs though, and this is a reality that's approaching us. I said to somebody again today that we're very water rich. It was the same conversation about water management. We're very water rich, which is great. We have a number of lakes and ponds nearby. We've got a lot of bogs and different things, and we tend to get a lot of rain. We're not getting snow as much as necessarily we did before. This past winter, we almost had no snow, which also compounds the dryness factor in the ground, because that snow, when it melts over the course, as you know, of several months, keeps the ground nice and amply wet. We're not seeing that as much as we necessarily did before. Growing up, it was snow in October. Now it's more like January. So it's making sure that we're managing those things to, again, keep the anxieties down for folks, because that definitely ran high when we were dealing with the fires. Keeping people informed, making sure the communication channels were still there, because we're kind of in a shift in terms of media right now, where there's still some traditional media and then there's the new social. So making sure that balance worked for both demographics of whoever's availing of either side. And thankfully, again, I'm just really, really, truly thankful for the leadership we had, not just at the municipal level, but at the provincial and federal levels to step in and make sure that this didn't become a catastrophe.
I want to turn back to the challenges of infrastructure, and thank you for allowing me to go on that little bit of a tangent, but you brought
Oh
it
my
up, so
God,
I
yeah.
just wanted to ask
Yeah.
that. Um, Infrastructure is one of those things that we often don't think about because it's not a tangible item that we can actually touch on a regular basis. Now, when we turn on our water, when we go to the washroom every morning, we know that infrastructure is working. But when you put money into infrastructure repairs, it's often looked at as oh, okay, you're just fixing it, but it's a needed fix. It's things that you
Yeah.
actually do need. And last time I checked, infrastructure repairs are not cheap. The last time I checked, they are getting more and more expensive as we talk.
Yeah.
You talked about affordability and the challenges that come with that as the second biggest challenge that it's going to face. How do you balance those things? Because infrastructure is a must. You need infrastructure to have a properly running municipality, but I can't imagine you going to the people of St. John's tomorrow and saying, "Guess what? This budget, we're going to raise your taxes 20% to offset the challenges that we're facing." Now,
Yeah.
if you do raise your 20%, then that's a whole new conversation you're not going to have, but it's just not feasible because people are struggling. How do you
Yeah.
balance the growth and the repairs of a community with the realities that we live in? Is that hard?
I think it's a balance. Like anything, you have to be responsive to what the community is facing today, what they're likely to face tomorrow, and then plan for the future. You plan for the best, you hope for the best, but at the end of the day, you got to be prepared for the worst too. And when that day comes, we want to be ready. We had a massive snowmageddon event. I mean, we were talking feet of snow, and it just did not stop. Right before COVID too, it was really quite the year and quite the ominous foreshadowing. But again, it's that forward thinking planning and everything. So again, back to water, because water is such a vital infrastructure. If you don't have water, then farmers can't use that for their fields. Fire trucks can't put out fires. You have nothing to drink. You can't flush your toilet. You can't clean things. Water is so vital to so many businesses and industries. It's really a core piece of infrastructure. And when you talk about aging infrastructure, a lot of our pipes are pre-Confederation, right? I mean, that they're that old when you think 1949 level. But again, thankfully, we've done so much to just make sure that that forward thinking planning really helps us. So last year we didn't raise the taxes, but we did put the water, what I'll call the water tax, up by $5 per unit. That doesn't sound like a lot, and thankfully it isn't too much. But when you do it across the board, that helps kind of just again continue to make sure that we have an ample resource that can support such a vital component of our city. So it's those baby steps, not having to do such a massive thing right out the gate.
But how do you balance the forward thinking? Because you're right, you need to plan for the
Yeah.
future, which is always understandable. But
Yeah.
when you and I both pay our property taxes, we want to feel like a little bit of it is going to be helping me here and now.
Yeah.
Now, I can imagine you've heard the pothole stories. You've heard probably the park needs to be upgraded stories. You've heard the very micro issues. And I say micro as in
Yeah.
the sense that they're not on the big cities wide scale, but they are
Hmm.
important to the people who are bringing them to your attention. How do you ensure that you don't just plan for the future because people want to feel like they're getting something in return today? Because it's engagement, it's also forward thinking, but it's also realizing that we can't just always be planning for the future, or do you have to in some sense?
I think you do have to plan. It's kind of, if you think of even indigenous traditions of planning for the seven generations, I want to plan for the seven generations that are going to come after me, my grandkids, my grandkids, grandkids, really just to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for higher quality of life every single time. Um, it's so important to think that way. And I'll draw on my background as a lawyer here. The joke I always make to people with wills, it's a great example. A lot of people don't want to do it, and then they'll come to me and they'll say, I want to get a will, and I'll say, okay, yeah, sounds good. How much is the question I always get following that? And I'll say, the one thing you need to realize is you can pay a couple of $100 now, or when you pass, you can pay a few thousand. So it's up to you. And that's money that's going to come out of your kids' pockets. Again, just thinking that, what happens tomorrow mentality. Because if you spend up front, you can save down the line. And I really think that's something I'd like to take forward. And thankfully, we have a very strong financial position in a lot of ways. Of course, we could do a lot better if we had more resources, like anybody. But finding those ways to just make sure we manage what we do have, so the resources we do have, and expanding it at a rate that works for the community, but still allows for when something bad happens that we're still going to be okay.
So you understand that. I understand that. But do the residents understand that? Because we talk about engagement, talk
Mm-hmm.
about education.
Yeah.
How do people understand that sometimes you do have to make the tough decisions today for the betterment of tomorrow? Do they get that, or is there a sense that, okay, no, you're out to left field? Which I say that to the guy who just got
Yeah.
acclaimed as the Ward 3 councillor, so no one ran against you. So I'm assuming people understand that you're doing it for the greater good.
I certainly hope. I, I think at the end of the day, it's part of my job
Yeah.
is to make those hard decisions, but also to inform people and let them know why we're taking certain positions. And I've tried to take paramount above all is just to be transparent. I want everybody to know what I'm doing, why council is doing something, those types of things. That way, when it's all out on the table and the cards are all there, there's none of this finger pointing. Everybody knows what is happening and why we're making these choices. And I think that is key. And again, getting back to our conversation a few moments ago about disagreements, I want those disagreements. I want to disagree with people at times because if we have that and we have that transparency and openness, we can really, again, just zero in on what is the most important and the best outcome, and just to make sure the community is doing as well as it can.
The last area you talked about was the provincial downloading, and Newfoundland and Labrador is not alone in the provincial downloading sphere. We are seeing more and more provincial governments. I don't want to say abdicate their role and responsibilities, but it kind of is. Because mental health and addiction is not something that the municipality is set up properly to deal with, but they're dealing with it on a regular basis. They're not set up to deal with the crime challenges that come with things, but they're dealing with it. What's been the biggest download that you have seen from the province to the municipality, and how is the municipality setting up itself to ensure that even though the province has downloaded the responsibility or abdicated their responsibility onto the municipality, you're not doing it alone because you have other challenges that you have to face. And I can imagine going to the budget time and saying, we have to spend $100,000 on an area we were not thinking about spending last year, but now we have to because the province, or even, I should say this, the federal government has told us now we have to look after it.
I don't know that I could pick one specific area, but I think what I would say as kind of a general commentary on that stuff is that we're kind of in what some people have called it an administrative era. We have a number of organizations, not necessarily just municipalities, that kind of have done the role of what traditionally were left to the government before. Again, whether it's social supports, in some cases, we have advocacy for infrastructure supports here in the city of St. John's and across Newfoundland and Labrador. So you have a lot of these administrative bodies that kind of take upon themselves those responsibilities to really fill the gap. It's definitely cheaper in a lot of cases. It saves the government a lot of money. There's not the associated pensions. There's not the associated healthcare, unions, and everything else that kind of comes with having government employees. So there's definitely some value there. And not only that, there's less restrictions on a lot of these things because then they have a bit more free play. They're a bit more independent to address issues as they see in real time and not have to go up the chain to get that decision, or the budget approval, what have you. So there's pros and cons to it.
Can I
Yeah,
ask interrupt and ask a
yeah,
question here? How
sure.
often are you hearing from residents about provincial and federal jurisdictional issues? Because I can imagine you are the closest to the people. I know
Yeah,
I say this all the
daily.
time,
Yeah,
but you don't go off to the legislature to do your job.
yeah,
You don't go off to the House of Commons to do your job. You're
mhm,
in your community 24/7. And
yeah,
that means people probably know you more than their MHA or their MP because you probably see them more often than their
right.
provincial or federal representative. So how often are you hearing those provincial and federal issues when people come talk to you, or do you?
Yeah, I think it's daily, truthfully. It depends on what the issue is specifically. One of the bigger ones, I think, is kind of social issues. So maybe that's probably the answer, truthfully, is the social component. Um, we don't run hospitals, though. That's municipalities don't do that. We don't have social workers that go into the community to deal with these things. We don't have police agencies that respond to calls, we don't. I know other municipalities do, but the city of St. John's doesn't. We do have a provincial police agency, the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, but they're also province wide. They're not just in St. John's. We have no authority over them. So it is probably the social component, I would say, and whether that's mental health, addictions, homelessness, poverty as a whole. Because again, I walk down the street and I see someone begging, and somebody sees me. What's the city doing about that? What's the city doing about discarded needles, those types of things? And we do a lot, and we do try to do as much as we can within our own wheelhouse. But it gets tricky and it gets hard because we don't have the capacity, resources to deal with the root cause of these issues.
While you don't, what you do have is the relationships that can help.
Yeah,
Relationships with the provincial government, relationships with even
yeah,
nonprofits, because we often forget about that, but also relationships with the residents who want to help out. Because I think, truthfully, like we all want to help out our fellow man, we want to help out for the better good of our communities, and we want to make sure people feel like they are secure in their and
yeah.
safe in their neighborhoods. So you do have the relationships. How important is it for yourself to build those relationships to ensure that when you try to fix a problem, you're doing it not just as the municipality, but as a team St. John's approach
Yeah.
instead of just a okay, Ward 3 issue or a city issue or a provincial issue.
Yeah, I think it's huge because look, again, at the end of the day, if we have a city that's more friendly to businesses, businesses mean jobs. When people have jobs, they have income. That income then can help make sure they have housing. Never mind on the affordable aspect, but it helps ensure that they have that. They have somewhere to go. They have food. Having food on the table is such a huge thing for people. Food insecurity is a huge issue in the province here. So those types of things, how we can build up again, whether it's bringing in jobs, bringing in construction and everything that comes with it, that has that ripple effect. And it really does have a significant effect, especially too, because the more these businesses that come to the city of St. John's, the larger our tax base is, the more we can spend practically and proactively. Again, whether it's us having a 311 service that's 24/7, 365, responding to calls for people. It just allows us to do that much more. And in terms of some of these other specific social issues, I've kind of taken the approach, and I think this is a fair statement of the city a bit more broadly, is that these issues kind of intersect, whether it's a provincial, federal, or municipal issue. They all intersect. So if you talk about issues with crime, if the city has better lighting in certain areas, there's a lower likelihood that petty theft will happen in an area or a car break in. Again, if we have more jobs, well, then there's a better likelihood that people won't be on income supports and those types of things. So it tends to snowball, but you're right there. And I think that you have to take that collaborative team approach. I certainly have done that to the best of my ability to make sure that we're all working together. Because again, even if we're talking about our local MHA or our MP, we all live in the same community, and we all want to see that development and community spirit and everyone succeeding.
I want to flip the original question on its head because I don't want people to assume that St. John's is only challenges. What's the one
Yeah,
thing that you think that the city does right? At the end of the day, we all have our challenges, but what's the one
yeah.
thing you go, you know what? We're doing this great.
I can't just give you one.
Okay, give me three.
Okay, three, excellent. So I think, and you're giving me a lot here. This is good. Heritage, we
I,
do great with our heritage and our tourism. I think that's probably one of the crown things we really do a great job. We've got a heritage expert panel that helps make sure that our buildings are protected. It definitely could go further, like anything could, but it makes sure that the character of St. John's is still there. When you're on that cruise ship or you're on that boat or you're flying in and you come in through the Narrows and you see the city, you see that character, you see that history that really just drives people to say, wow, yeah, I am in St. John's. So that I think is huge. The heritage aspect is amazing. So I'm the lead for parks. I would also say we've got really good park infrastructure, some very fantastic areas. We protect a lot of our green spaces. We have some great trails, and we're continuing to build those up. And then as well, I would just say we're doing our best, I think, and we do a great job of responding to building up to the needs of the community, whether that's active transport or being responsive to make sure that we have developments coming through in a guided yet effective and development friendly manner. There's always tricks with that, of course, but finding ways to make sure we can keep things moving along while still working with the community, working with neighborhoods, and just making sure that everybody has a voice at the end of the day with that. That's my take, at least.
Okay, which is good. So I usually turn to the tourism question here now
Yeah.
because I'm cautious of time, but I'm going to add in a new segment because we're about to enter into the next term. And
Yeah.
while you and I believe one other councillor have been acclaimed into their positions, you're going to have a brand new council because a few people are not running in this election. And that means you're going to have at least some new faces around that
Yeah.
table. What's priority one for you once the new council is sworn in?
Priority one, I would say, is making sure that the new councillors are as supported as I was supported to make sure that they can do right by the people that put them in the place, put them in the position in the first place. I think that's huge because at the end of the day, if they're falling down, then we're all going to fall down, and that's a reflection of not just myself but everybody. And I think that's probably the biggest priority immediately, is making sure that everybody is supported, has an opportunity to grow. I'm a big fan of building up people, not building them down. So I think that'll be priority number one, at least for the first few weeks.
And what's priority number one for the people of Ward 3?
Priority number one for the people of Ward 3, so it's funny. My district is very diverse. And I always tell people that there's kind of three main components, but even within those components, there's unique neighborhoods. So I've got what's called Cowan Heights, Money Pond, and Waterford Valley. I grew up in Cowan Heights. I went to school in Waterford Valley, and I live in Money Pond. So touching on that, making sure that everybody has a proper representative, somebody who knows the area, knows the issues. And I think that ultimately is the biggest thing. And I certainly put my foot forward to try to do the best of that every day.
Well, I appreciate that. Now it's my favorite segment time because I told the current mayor and who's running for reelection, Danny Breen, back when I had him on the show 2.5 years ago, that I was coming out to see St. John's, but now the plane tickets are booked. I'm on the plane before we head to MNL. I'm stopping in St. John's for 3 days beforehand. What should a tourist do in November/October when they're there? I know you said that the winter is usually nice. Last year it wasn't as snowy as it has been in the past. But then later on in the episode, you said a few years before that, it was a snowstorm.
That's
So
right.
who
Yeah.
knows
Yeah.
what it could be this year? But what can
Yeah.
people do while they're in St. John's that you would recommend?
Well, I'm going to flip it back to you. What types of things do you like to do the most? And then I'll give
Uh,
you what I would suggest.
Museums, coffee
Okay.
shops, and I like to
Yeah.
see anything political. So FYI, I already know my one stop is going to be City Hall because I'm just
Good.
like a sucker for
Yeah.
going through a city hall and seeing all the history that's there, going to the legislature, but museums, art galleries, parks, the boardwalk, like you name it, I'm up for it. But a little bit of what's the hidden gems? What are things that people
Yeah.
need to see?
Okay, so definitely take in, I would say our downtown core is huge, big draw, but within our downtown core, there's a lot of nuances and little gems, kind of, whether it's our National War Memorial. I always make a point to say we have two National War Memorials in Canada. There is one in downtown St. John's, so check that out. We just had the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was placed there not too long ago. Very symbolic area. I highly recommend taking a look at. Signal Hill, of course, see Cabot Tower. Do the walk. You've got to do the walk. It's about 45 minutes, but do the one thing that a lot of tourists don't do. It snakes through the trails there are really historic and they snake through neighborhoods. So you'll be walking up alongside someone's house and it's a public path. You'll feel like you're walking into their backyard, but nope, you're walking along the public path. Go up those areas, look for the wooden sign that says trails this way. Make sure you go to as many cafes as you can. Stop into whether it's in Kitty Vitty for a pint and a bite of fish and chips. You can do that after your walk, of course. Check out the East Coast Trail. I'm a big proponent of. Not enough people know about that. It stretches the whole length of the Avalon Peninsula. You can get lost in nature, not actually get lost. It's an island. You can't get lost. Just follow the coastline. But get lost in nature for a few moments, take it in, and see our other neighboring communities too. They have a lot to offer. I can't say that enough. It's a beautiful place. It's so near and dear to my heart, and I think you'll have a great time.
I'm looking forward to seeing it up close and personal. But what's your favorite part? Where after a long day of work, after a long day of council meetings, is there a place that you go in St. John's that you can decompress? And I'm going to preface it by saying
Yeah.
you can't say your own house. You have to say somewhere outside your house.
Yeah. I'll go in the woods. Honestly, we'll go for a hike, take the dog for a walk. We've got a lot of great nature trails. Again, whether it's the East Coast Trail, and they're within the city of St. John's too, which is incredible. So that's what I like to do a lot of. We have a really nice place called Freshwater Bay. It's an old resettled community. It's now actually mostly protected as a water conservation area. Go down that path that people used to walk into St. John's many years ago before it was resettled. See the foundations of the houses. See the shipwreck that's down there at the Barishwa between the freshwater pond and the bay. Take that in. It's a 40-minute walk down, maybe an hour and a half back up because it's uphill. But I'm telling you, it's a great spot to go. Have a boil up with some tea. That's what I certainly like to do.
Well, I feel like I'm going to have a packed 72 hours while I'm in St. John's, and I'm looking forward to it. But my last question before I let you go, because I'm very cautious of time, and I know I've taken a little
Yeah.
bit more time than I probably anticipated, but
Okay.
in your opinion, what makes the city of St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador a great place to live, to work, and to raise a family, Councillor?
It's the easiest answer I can give, and the easiest question I'll ever have, I think, because the answer is so perfect. It's the people. It really is the people in the community, and I feel so blessed. Just you walk outside, you see someone or you're going for a walk along a trail, and you run into a friend you haven't seen in a little while, but you reconnect again, and you make new friends constantly. You go have a cup of tea with somebody, you sit down with somebody at the cafe, or you play a pickup game of hockey or whatever it is. It's the people. They really just make it the place that it is, and just make St. John so interesting for me. That's an easy one for me.
Greg, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down and do this. I also want to thank you so much for randomly accepting my Instagram connection saying, hey, would you like to come on the show? And you said, sure, I'd love to. And I went, okay, this is great. So I really appreciate you doing this. It truly seems like you really like talking to people and talking to people a lot on Fridays. I don't know why, but here we are. But thank you so much for doing this, Greg.
Thanks, Chris. Listen, I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in St. John's. Message me. We'll go for one of these hikes.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Cross Border Interviews. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights into the world of Newfoundland and Labrador's municipal politics. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platforms, or if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button now to never miss an upcoming episode. Your support means the world to us. So if you can, share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we will be back with a brand new episode of Cross Border Interviews next week. Till then, everyone.